So we're recording, and I'll make it available to the other guys, to the other girls. I will share screen. So what I thought we might start by talking about is the practical exam. So in short, the practical exam will go for 1 hour, and you will have one patient with a pathology that you will find out about on the day. Okay? So before you go into the room, you'll be given some indication about what kind of pathology the patient will have, whether it's something related to ventricular function or something related to valvular function. And you'll be expected to, obviously, to, following the imaging sequence, focus up on images and measurements that are going to enable you to estimate, what exactly you're looking at. Okay. In terms of the way it will run, you're given approximately, 2 minutes just to introduce yourself to start with, and to connect the ECG, to position the patient, the equipment as you want. If you need a couple, more moments than 2 minutes, but that's roughly speaking. Then you'll be asked if you're ready. There'll be a timer alongside you, and it'll be set for 45 minutes. So throughout the exam, you'll be able to see that timer, okay? And you just click 45. Now, may I suggest that rather than leaving it till that day to work out whether you can do the imaging sequence in 45 minutes, you just, over the next little while, pay a bit more attention as to how long, imaging takes you, okay, so that you get an idea of perhaps views that take you a little bit longer than others, just so that you're very aware of how you're going to need to manage your time, because we're not going to say, look, 40 minutes is up and you haven't even started, on the, apical views, just to over-exaggerate, but yeah. You'll be expected to make your way through the imaging sequence. The imaging sequence will be there alongside you if you have a mind, if your mind goes blank or something like that. But it's really only there as a guide. If you're looking at it all the time, I think you're not going to be using your time particularly well. So be very familiar with that. Once the 45 minutes is up, you'll be asked to stop. If you acquire all the images you need before the 45 minutes and you're not happy with some, you're most welcome to go back and use all the 45 minutes, okay? You can make measurements over and make full use of that 45 minutes. When that's finished, Julianne, have we lost you?
No, still here.
No, still
someone else has joined.
Okay.
Yeah, I joined. Hi, Paul. It's Madhu.
Hello.
Yeah.
Madhu, we've only just started and I'm recording this, so any minor things that you might have missed, you'll be able to see tomorrow. But we're starting off by going through the practical exam.
Okay, yeah.
The practical exam, in short, what I've just said, it goes for an hour. You have 2 minutes to position the patient and start, and then imaging time is 45 minutes. So you're expected to go through the imaging sequence in 45 minutes. After the 45 minutes is complete, the timer will stop and you'll be asked to stop imaging. At that point, you'll be given a couple of minutes just to review the images so that you can then answer 10 specific questions, okay? And they constitute the report that you're going to give. So by the time all of that is up, 45 minutes imaging time after your introduction, roughly 8 to 10 minutes to answer a question, that the entire exam will go for 1 hour, okay? On the screen here, I've just moved the the page. So, Julianne, can you now see one that's got a marking criteria there?
Yeah, I can do.
So this is how the marking criteria is broken up. As you can see, patient interaction and positioning the patient is worth 4 marks. Parasternal images, 12 marks. Apical images, 22. Subcostal images, 6. And the report, 6. For a grand total of 50 marks. Okay? Looking at those things a little bit more carefully, patient interaction and positioning just means that, you know, how you introduce yourself to the patient, how you talk to the patient throughout, you know, repositioning, etc., etc. Parasternal images, what you need to do is obviously acquire appropriate 2D and Doppler images, and then, you know, optimize those appropriately and according to how well or how not so well you've done that, you're given marks. Furthermore, if you followed the imaging sequence, you're given marks as well. If the imaging sequence isn't perfectly aligned with the other, no problem, just as long as you acquire all the images that are necessary. Okay? The same goes for the apical images, which are worth by far the most. Okay, so that should encourage you to allow yourself, or make sure you give yourself plenty of time to acquire apical images. Again, go through things very systematically, acquiring 2D images, reduce your depth, zoom up for measurements, etc., etc. Subcostal images the same, and then the report. With regards to pass mark, the exam is worth 50%. The exam itself is what's called threshold. What that means is that you need to pass this exam in order to pass the unit. The pass mark is 32 out of 50, or more than 32 out of 50. Okay, so that's the pass mark. I've just changed the page. Based on what I've seen, I think you guys are doing well in terms of your images. Just some general feedback. With regards to 2D imaging, I think you guys need to pay attention to gain settings. I think the gains overall were just a little bit low. I'm getting lots of feedback here. I hope you can hear things okay, Madhu.
Yes, yes.
Julianne, you're okay?
Yeah, Dan, it's
Great,
fine.
okay. So, generally speaking, gain settings were low, and the TGC settings I just sensed could have been optimized a little bit better. The near field or the far field or whatever. Remember that you need to change your focus each time you go to a new view. Well, you're most likely to need to, okay? So pay attention to it, making those adjustments. As a general rule, LV volumes were on the low side, which meant ejection fraction measurements were on the high side. I got a lot of ejection fraction measurements in the 70s. Now that may well be right, but that usually indicates that the ventricle is quite hyperdynamic, okay? A normal ejection fraction is around 60 to 65. Once you start looking at 70 and 75, which I got, you're wondering whether this patient's been given some kind of agent to help their heart, or whether they've just stepped off a treadmill or something like that, okay?
Yep.
For left atrial volume measurements, zoom up just to make sure that you get an accurate measurement. I saw lots of subcostal views where the LVOT was open, which means it's very difficult then to clearly see the interatrial septum. So when you're acquiring a subcostal view, really the only view I want you guys to be acquiring is a 4-chamber view so that you can see the interatrial septum very clearly. Okay, so you should be trying to ensure that the left ventricular outflow tract is not seen in that subcostal view. And get very used to clearly demonstrating the IVC reactivity. That is to say, I want to be able to see the IVC collapse, and so you need to save a number of cardiac cycles demonstrating that fact. If it does collapse, sometimes it may not. If it doesn't, I want to see a number of cardiac cycles that show that it's not collapsing more than 50%. With regards to Doppler imaging, simple things. Just remember, adjust your baseline, whether it be up or down. Reduce your scale. Make more than one measurement. I notice that you guys are quite particular about color boxes, and that's really good. You're making the color boxes, small and big. Just don't make your color box so small that you're making it more difficult than it should be to see, the flow. So remember that width does affect frame rate, but the length of the color box doesn't. So you want to be able to make your color box a reasonable size so that you can see any abnormal flow. You can always increase the scale setting on the machine. And with regards to tissue Doppler measurements, measure the brightest point, which may not necessarily be the peak. Okay? The brightest point is what you want to measure. So I might just go back here and stop sharing my screen for a moment. Any questions at this stage?
Not really. Just with regards to the machines, will we know before the exact date whether we'll have an email?
Yep. So with about 2 weeks beforehand, I will send you all an email and just ask you to indicate to me what machine you want. Okay? I will make it very clear the 3 machines that we'll be using. I don't know at this point exactly what machines I'll be getting from Blacktown, but closer to the date I will, and I'll just ask you. I can't guarantee that you'll get the machine, but I'm confident that you should be able to get the machine that you want. Okay?
So if we don't get the machine that we normally use, will we get extra time? Because I know they're the same principles, but to use a Philips compared to an E9, like that will take me 15 minutes longer.
Well, it shouldn't take 15 minutes longer, but if you're used to using the Philips machine, I'm certainly happy to provide, I'd say, 5 extra minutes to make extra measurements and that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. And that's across the board. That's the same for everyone. I might go and get another document. So I'm going to move on from what I just said, just to remind you again that via views you can see this document, which is the imaging sequence. So again, just be really familiar with the imaging sequence, so that when the time comes for the practical exam, that this is almost second nature, and you just know what images you're going to be acquiring next. There's another document available via views. Sorry, Julianne, I didn't share that. There's another document available via views. I will share it this time. Sorry, here we go. Share screen. It's called the Western Sydney Echocardiographic Examination Guidelines. I want to just remind you of pages 4 and 5, which just remind you about measurement conventions, okay, from things like, how do you make 2D measurements, what kind of things to focus on when making Doppler measurements, to end diastole, end systole, etc., just so that you're reminding yourself of all the simple things again. Just review that one more time to make sure that you've got very clear, time points, etc., that you need to be mindful of. So that's the practical exam in a nutshell. What I thought I might do is go through the marking criteria for the research report and then for the case study. So I'll share again, Julianne. So from tomorrow, via Views, you'll be able to see this document. So in the learning guide at the moment, you've got an overview of what's needed in the research report. This will give you a really clear idea of how we're going to be marking, or how I will be marking the research report. So the research report, remember, you're looking at the essential aspects of a specific echo technique, 3D, strain or contrast. The value is, it's worth 40% and the marks are out of 40, okay? 1,200 words in length, excluding references. With regards to formatting, submit a Word document via Turnitin again, okay? I would prefer you to have font at least, 11 in size and double spaced and numbered pages, just so I'm absolutely certain that I'm following along, okay? Mm-hmm. Images. Now, these don't have to be your own images for the research report, which is different to the case study, which we'll come to in a moment. For the research report, I'm happy for you to take, select images from textbooks and things like that. Obviously, you have to reference them and make them, make them worthwhile. Don't just choose anything random. Go to a little bit of trouble to include an image that's, going to support what you're trying to say in the report. And then there are sections, and I'll go through with those in just a moment. Introduction, evaluation, conclusion, and references. The submission date is Sunday, 28th of October, okay? So a couple of weeks' time, again, via Turnitin, via Views. So for the first section, the introduction, you just introduce the technique, the purpose and structure of the report. So, high distinction marking criteria says a concise yet clear introduction to the technique, a coherent and well-defined purpose that outlines the structure of the report. So given the report is going to be about 1,200 words, you don't want to waste all your time in the introduction. I would say that you want to limit yourself to one, at most 2 paragraphs in your introduction, just to make it very clear what the technique you're going to be reporting is, and then a little bit about how you're going to approach that. Now, a little bit of a pointer with introduction: don't spend too much time initially on your introduction. What's more important to do is spend a lot of time on the evaluation, and once you've written a good evaluation, then you're going to be able to then make an introduction and conclusion. Don't start writing in the sequence that it's going to appear in the report. Does that make sense? You're going to be able to, you may want to start the introduction, but make the refinements later, okay? I've changed the page. We're now looking at the evaluation. So the evaluation, you're evaluating your chosen technique, and you're wanting to say things like history, current applications, likely future development, etc. So, for example, if you're going to choose strain imaging, and this is just an example, you want to say roughly, when it was first developed, how it was first used. So you want to perhaps talk about the fact that initially it was a Doppler-based method. Now it's transitioned and you're using maybe mainly 2D images via speckle tracking. Then you want to look into the future at applications, whether it's going to be used in 2D only or 3D, etc., etc. Clinical applications. Where's it most often used? Future use, etc., etc. You want this to be logical and at a reasonable depth. I mean, if you're just only sort of glancing over the things, it's not going to be sufficient. And obviously, you want to have a logical progression in things. So in the history part, it's probably best to do things chronologically, okay? So I'll let you guys look into it at more depth, but in the marking criteria, there's high distinction, distinction, credit, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory, and that's what I draw on. The conclusion, again, a summary of key aspects of the report, and again, you can go through that. The conclusion really should be, when I say it should be compelling, what you want to do is really highlight the outstanding aspect of the thing that you're doing. You know, has it transformed, you know, echocardiography, or what particular part of echocardiography has it made a really big difference in, and focus on making that, you know, the real highlight of your conclusion. The images are worth a bit, and the referencing is worth a bit. Take your time with regards to referencing. Make sure you know that, you know, the Vancouver criteria. If you're familiar with EndNote, may I suggest that you use EndNote to help you with your references. If you've got 12 or more, you can be fairly confident if they're well, you know, if they're there correctly cited, that you'll get a good mark. If you've got less than 12, you can be less confident that you'll get a good mark in the referencing section. Okay, any questions?
No.
No, okay. I might move on just to the last section. I want to chat briefly about the case report. So you guys have already written a case report, so you kind of know what we're after. Nonetheless, I'll go through with it. I'll go through it again. So the case report. So in contrast to the research report, this is something that you've done yourself. The research report doesn't have to include images that you've acquired. This one does. They needn't all be echo images. Some of them can be from, you know, what the other imaging modality that you've been looking at, whether it's CT or angio or whatever the case may be. You may even want to include an ECG. Anyway, but they should be specific to this case. The value is 45%, 1,350 words. Format is similar, images similar. And I'll go through the sections in a moment. Title, intro, case description, discussion, images, conclusion, references. Submission date, Monday the 5th of November. So that's a week and a bit after the research report, okay? Monday evening, you know, midnight. The title, the reason that the title is, you're given marks for the title is, if you're ever going to submit a case report to a journal or something like that, they want a title that's a little bit attractive. You know, they want to, they don't want, you know, 60 words that just sort of waffle on. They want something that's reasonably eye-catching or appealing or something. So try and do the same with yours. You know, something that just gives some indication of what you found in your case report. So,
Paul,
yeah.
do we have to select the images for this patient who will be used for case report?
Yes, they're meant to be your images, Madhu. So obviously, in this case report, you want to include, because there's only 4 to 6 images, you want to include ones that are really pertinent to your case. So if it's a case of someone who has had an infarct and there's you know, some related mitral regurgitation, you show that. Or if the patient was taken to the cath lab and there was a critical stenosis, you try as best you can to get an angiogram image showing the before and after angiogram. Or if the patient, presented to ED and there were, it was T-wave inversion or whatever the case may be, you include an ECG.
So what about a patient with chest pain complain and come to the practice for a stress echo and then it is positive, and then do we and go through angiogram and that is positive as well? So do we have to show angiogram pictures as well, or just to summarize the findings of angiogram?
Look, I think, given that this is worth 45%, you guys, it's worth a good deal. You should go to trouble to get as much information as you can. Now, if you can display a wall motion abnormality with just still echo images alone, maybe I would try, if I were you, to get at least one angio image.
Okay.
And maybe if you're doing a stress test, you show the ECG at rest and the ECG at peak.
Okay.
And then indicate then with arrows. So pretend that I don't have a great deal of understanding of what you're trying to present in that case with an image. It's just like when you're submitting an image to a journal. They don't want you just to put an image there without any kind of indication of what you're trying to draw their attention to. Okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
No worries. So the case description is the part where you describe the case. It's not the part to go into a whole lot of detail about the pathology you're describing, but you want to give and oftentimes the chronological order is the best way to go about, how the patient presented, what kind of symptoms there were, what was found clinically, what was found on echo, and then you might want to indicate, what happened in the short or longer term for this patient, the outcome. So if, for example, the patient, came for the first time, with the indication, as you were saying, Madhu, was chest pain, and, it was a positive stress test, and you go on then to talk about an angiogram, you want to say that, an angiogram was done, a tight stenosis was found somewhere, they didn't, they ballooned the stenosis, put in a stent, 3 months later the patient came back and the cardiologist was happy, or something like that, okay?
Okay.
That's the description. And there's marking criteria for the images. The discussion is a little bit different. You want to discuss the most important aspects of the case. Not everything that you've imaged, it needs to be part of the cut of the case. If the patient had trivial, pulmonary regurgitation, I'm just exaggerating. That's not what you discuss. If it's you want to make it, really the important parts, and you want to then relate that to what published literature says, about that particular case, what you normally see in other people, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when you start drawing from the literature. Not in the case description, you do it in the discussion, in this section here. Is that reasonably clear?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, the conclusion is like the conclusion of your research article. You want to just highlight the really important findings, what was key, about this particular case. References are all also worth marks for this one as well. So, in short, that's the case report. We went through the research report. The practical exam. Are there any other questions at this point?
No.
Look, if you do have questions and you can't think of them now, you know, send them to me or whatever. Madhu, yep.
Sorry, so what about practical exam? Like, do you have any idea? Like, is it it will be started in the morning or in the afternoon session?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me to tell you that. So you'll be given staggered starts. So there will be 2 people who will start at 9:30.
Okay.
There'll be 2 people that start at approximately 11:15, and 2 people that start at 12 o'clock.
Okay.
The reason that there's an hour and a bit duration for that is so there's an hour for the exam and there's 15 minutes just for us to, get everything ready again, for the patient to sit up, to have a drink, to go to the bathroom, etc., etc. You'll be told 2 weeks prior to the exam. So the exam's definitely on the 17th of November. You'll be told 2 weeks prior what your exam time will be, okay?
Okay.
And there'll be 2 examiners. There'll be either myself or Kristen. It's random. So we will draw these names out of a hat. I don't know who I'm going to be examining yet, and neither does she, okay? With regards to the marking criteria, at the end of the exam, you won't be told, there won't be any high fives or anything like that. One of the reasons being is that we both look at the images just to make sure that we're happy that we've followed the marking criteria and all that kind of stuff. It's just what we've got to do to follow the School of Medicine procedures for this kind of exam, okay? Especially if there's someone that you're uncertain about, we want to be able to sort of, chat and say, okay, well, this was good or this wasn't good, etc., etc. I will try then to mark that exam very soon. I won't mark it on the Saturday, but I'll aim to mark it as soon as I possibly can on the Monday and Tuesday, or rather get final marks, back to you about that exam on the Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
I can't tell you your overall final exam. I'm just asked not to tell you that, but at least you'll have some idea of how you went into the practical exam. I'm not going to go in length. I just know that it's stressful. I understand. So I'll give you some kind of idea, okay? Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Look, I think I've covered most things. I will email your supervisors again just to encourage them to be very generous with their time in helping support you. If you're not used to imaging with someone else there, may I suggest that at least once that you do it with your supervisor. The feedback that I've given you, maybe just say to them, look, it's been encouraged that I focus on this or that. How did I go in these couple of exams? Just give yourself every chance to do really well, okay? Try and take that feedback. That does take a little bit of time to give, and use it as constructively as possible. So, yeah. Look, what I'll do is I'll